All right, buddy, unfortunately, the off season is here, but we are back with another Steelers Roundtable, looking back at 2019 and looking ahead for what 2020 may bring. Joining me on the panel today, Craig Wolfley, former Steelers offensive lineman, friend of the program. Also, Bob Labriola is here. We brought him down. He's not willingly here, but Charlie Batch, former Steelers quarterback, is here. He's always happy. So glad to have everybody joining me here today. We are going to play a little fill in the gap. So my first statement for you guys, the 2019 season was, Labs, fill in the gap for us on this one first.
Nerve-wracking because, this was the first time in a long time that the Steelers offense was really operating on a razor-thin edge, very little margin for error, what with Ben Roethlisberger missing all but 6 quarters of the regular season. And in the NFL today, if you can't score, if you don't have the kind of offense that is prolific, that can be clutch, your margin for error is 0. How many of those games did we see go down to the last possession? How many went down to the last play? You look at the Steelers, they scored 29 offensive touchdowns on the season. Only Washington and Cincinnati scored fewer offensive touchdowns. The Steelers were 27th in the league in points per game. And, especially when you look at it in light of what the Steelers offense had been, the previous couple of seasons, 30-point games were, kind of the norm. But the Steelers didn't score 30 points in any game in either a win or a loss for the first time since 1971. So I found myself taking a lot of deep breaths and feeling for my heart at the end of those games, especially those wins when the Steelers went through that little winning streak from mid-October to mid-November. Those were hard on my heart.
The interesting thing is you point out nerve-wracking, and the first thing I thought of, the most nerve-wracking moment of 2019, was after Ben threw that ball and then grabbed his elbow. I remember just standing on the sidelines going, uh-oh. I mean, because it was, I'd never seen that before from him. He's such a tough guy. He overcomes this and that. And him not coming out in the second half, that was like, I went, whoa.
I'm glad I didn't see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it might have just shattered you that day. I mean, I just remember that. Ooh, yeah. So that was nerve-wracking. Yeah, that moment, even more so.
All right, well, if your turn to fill it in for us, 2019 season was.
Going to the glasses.
Oh, you had to go to the glasses, baby. And it would be Rocky Balboa.
Okay,
explain.
One
of the most famous statements Rocky ever made. And I'm not sure if it was Rocky 1, Rocky 2, was manager dead or alive, that thing. But it's not about how hard you can hit, but it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. When you think about 2019, you come out 6 quarters in, you lose your Hall of Famer. You go through 4 quarterbacks essentially in this calendar year. You go through 4 running backs. You lose your fullback. You lose Stephon Tuitt. You lose, it's one after another after another. Pouncey. Things going haywire and just, sideways. There was just one blow after another, and yet this team rallied and stayed with it. They never lost the message Mike Tomlin put out there. They played hard each and every week. They were in, and I think back to that Baltimore game. I thought you saw the weight of the whole season, all the miscues, all the injuries, everything that had happened transpired in that last 5 minutes. And that game just kind of said to me, it just got away from them, But they, all season long, they kept taking hits and kept moving forward. And I really respect that.
What I never had seen before was a team taking players off other teams' practice squads on a Tuesday and getting them ready to play at the end of that week. And these guys were, Kareth White, he had 7 or 8 carries. Deon Cain made a big play, I think, in his first game in a Steelers uniform. So, and they weren't just like filling in on special teams or something. They were taking legitimate reps on offense and, making contributions. It was a lot of bouncing back.
And to your point, Labs, once Ben Roethlisberger's injury happened, there were over 60 transactions that happened throughout the course of this regular season. So that was something that really, to credit to Mike Tomlin, he did a great job of really getting those guys ready to play.
All right, Charlie, fill in the gap for us. The 2019 season was.
For me, it was interesting. And I say that because I had high expectations for this defense. Didn't necessarily know what was going to happen because the youth side of it was on the offensive side of the ball. But once Ben Roethlisberger went down, now it gave us the ability to see what these backups were capable of doing. This was a chance for Mason Rudolph. We didn't expect Duck Hodges to be in there, but Mason to show that he belongs in this league. And when you do that from the beginning of the season, it gives the organization an opportunity to evaluate him. And for him as an excitement, as a young guy, you want to be thrown into the mix, because if Ben played every snap like he's done the prior years, that means we wouldn't know what Mason was capable of doing in a meaningful game. So I thought it was important for him to go out there, show what he was capable of doing, leading this offense, which he showed flashes of. But at the same time, once the injury happened, we saw what Duck Hodges was capable of. So there are still a lot of questions on the offensive side of the ball, but for them, that is valuable experience for a young guy to get out there and play in meaningful games in the regular season versus scripted for success plays in the preseason.
All right, we are now going to do our next statement. Blank gives me hope in 2020. Charlie, you can go first on this one.
And to my point, Ben gives me hope going into the 2020 season. Why? Because the defense, rock solid. Hopefully all of those guys are coming back. But now when you look back on the offensive side of the ball, the weapons that he had, Deontay Johnson, a healthy Juju Smith-Schuster, these are guys that you know that are going to bring more things to this offense. The evolution of James Washington. So when you add Ben to this equation, now it's going to help with the running game. It's going to ease the pressure off the offensive line, and Ben is going to now get this offense over that 30-point mark, something they failed to do, like Labs mentioned.
All right, Wolf?
Well, indeed, you gave me the segue to set this up, because my hope is Deontay Johnson. What gives me hope is this young man who came on, and I looked at this guy and I said, you know, he's got great route running ability. He's got quickness. He's got all the things that make a wide receiver capable, but you just don't know based on the fact that you've lost Lev Bell, Antonio Brown, all these guys, and you think, well, this guy, he's going to be your lead pony on there, and he was. I mean, he was the leader in the wide receivers room at the end of the year, 59 receptions. He also gave us punt return capabilities. He led the league in punt returns. It's been a long time since a Steeler, I believe in the 60s, before a Steeler actually has led the league in punt returns. So this guy gives me great hope, and the fact is, he's a tough guy. I mean, he took one in the grill, got concussed, and came back, what, a week later or something like that? 2 weeks later with whatever, I can't even remember. But the fact was, he recovered very quickly.
You took some shots at that.
I did indeed, brother. And you know what?
That's why you can't remember.
It's like I told my wife one time. She said, "How long did it take you to recover from a concussion?" I said, "What was the play clock? Was it 35 seconds?"
But, you know, to your point, too, about Deontay Johnson, one of the things we haven't mentioned in terms of what the Steelers had to overcome this season was the death of wide receivers coach Darryl Drake during training camp. And Deontay Johnson was Darryl Drake's, I believe, that's his legacy. Because after he was drafted in the third round, that was been Friday, second and third round, we got a chance to talk to him on Steelers Nation Radio. And Darryl Drake, I won't say it was his pick, his guy, but he was very, very high on him, really recommended him highly. And the Steelers came to, you know, see what a lot of what he saw in him as well. And so, you know, Deontay Johnson, in my mind anyway, will always be linked with Darryl Drake.
That's a great point.
And also, Deontay Johnson hasn't had much time with Ben Roethlisberger. So just imagine whenever Ben's able to come back this offseason, training camp, whatever, to work with him, we will see big things.
Why didn't you
like
give me these
saying.
great points before I shot my bad?
We're just helping you, Wolf. We're helping you. All right, Labs, fill in the gap. Blank gives me hope in 2020.
The big play defense, and you know, we've talked a little bit about already that you know, it's a solid group and all of that stuff. But the thing about it, to me, it evolved in an area that was lacking in many of the previous seasons, and that is in the area of taking the ball away. You know, sacking the quarterback. The previous couple of seasons, the Steelers were either first in total sacks or first in sacks per pass attempt. So they can get after the quarterback. But what they showed this season, as opposed to 2018, when they tied a franchise low with only 8 interceptions, you know, the Steelers have been in business since 1933. And when you tie a low that was set in 1940 for fewest interceptions by a defense, They didn't throw the ball a whole lot in 1940, and they only played 11 games. And so that to me was a very alarming statistic. But the 2019 Steelers led the NFL with 38 takeaways. They were second in the NFL with 20 interceptions, and they led the NFL again in sacks with 54. And so when you play defense like that to me, this now is the kind of defense that really can take a team into contention for a championship, because you have to be able, in my opinion, to take the ball away from the opponent. You can't depend on just shutting teams down anymore. And so Minkah Fitzpatrick and Joe Hayden and on and on and on, Bud Dupree, TJ Watt, all of these guys with the takeaways, that really gives me a lot of optimism for 2020.
All right, and we are going to talk about a lot of those defensive guys Labs was mentioning who are unrestricted free agents later in the show. But coming up next, Charlie and I are going to talk quarterbacks. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, Charlie, is it fair to say 2019, the year of the quarterbacks for the Steelers, maybe for good and bad reasons?
It really is. And I think when you get to this point, everything obviously is magnified at the quarterback position. And nobody expected Ben to get hurt. But whenever you have young guys that are filling in, and at that point, are they able to go out there and perform? You get excited in preseason, but when they're thrown into the regular season, now it gives you an opportunity to really evaluate and see whether guys are ready to play.
All right, I want to start with Mason Rudolph. We want to pick your brain here. Ben goes down against the Seattle Seahawks. Mason Rudolph comes in, throws 2 touchdowns to Vance McDonald. What did you see from him from that point forward, and then dealing with some ups and downs as well?
Well, I think number one, it starts with identifying and understanding the playbook. Mason did a really good job of that, understanding, if you see this play right here, understanding it's one high. He wanted to go to the flea flicker here. But he does a nice job of setting his feet, anticipating, and letting his receivers run with the football. So that was something I was excited about as the season continued to go on.
What's something that you think Mason can take away from this season and work on as he heads into this offseason?
Well, I just remember being a young quarterback at that point and going from first year to second year, the offseason, the number of plays that you play allows you to now go out there and see what you were capable of doing, but also what you need to work on. So I think one of the things that he'll have to understand is you don't always have to get into the perfect play. Yes, you can change protections, you can do all of this in anticipation of hitting the big play down the field, but it's okay to throw a hot every now and then.
Right.
It's okay to do that, take the 5 yards, because once you prove that you can beat the blitz, you won't see that blitz throughout the rest of the game. So that's something that he has to learn at this point. But also understanding out of the shotgun, hey, when you're there, 3-step drop, 5-step drops, that matches up with the route depth. And that's something that he has to work on with his footwork, because these defensive backs in the league, they are really good at what they do too. And once you stop your drop, they're going to stop their drop and they're going to break on footballs a lot faster than what you're accustomed to.
In Coach Tomlin's season-ending press conference, he said Mason Rudolph is the backup. Why do you think he made that statement, and why is he going with him as the backup?
Well, it was interesting when I heard that comment, because yes, he's excited about where Mason is at, but also in that comment there, he said he's also disappointed on the time that he missed.
Right.
Why? Because he's not able to use that time to evaluate him even longer to see if he's capable of doing. Because if Ben comes back like everybody expects him to come back to, that means Mason won't play at all next year unless it's mop-up duty. So that's just something for him that he has to now use this experience to prove not only to the coaching staff, to this organization, but to the players on his team, when he has to step into that huddle, that he's capable of performing. And that was something why guys got excited about when he had to step back into the Jets game and was able to move the offense that way. People were excited about that.
All right, the injuries to Mason, we saw Devlin Hodges early in the season, and then the change in Cincinnati whenever Coach Tomlin pulled Mason Rudolph, put him in. We saw the spark that was provided. What do you make of his season? A guy who didn't even make the initial 53-man roster. We saw what he could do a little bit in the preseason, and then was able to help the Steelers get some wins.
I always said that he was playing with house money. He wasn't supposed to be here. He won a rookie tryout. He earned a spot on this roster as the season went on. But for him, stepping up in the backup role, you don't know when you're going to play. So I thought he did a really nice job of filling in, especially in that Baltimore game when nobody knew. Of course, the fumble happened with Juju Smith-Schuster, but he showed me in that game that he was anticipating, he was going to get the ball out of his hands, and he was going to go out here and move the football. Now he just has to expand his knowledge of the offense. And right now, when you start having a vanilla package, because you're not really sure, you don't have a working relationship with Hodges at this point, but the more the season went on, the more you can expand the playbook. And for him, he wants to say, hey, yeah, I played well, but I also made a lot of mistakes, but I also want to prove in the offseason I'm capable of making a roster in 2020.
All right, now what would you say to Duck heading into this offseason of what he could work on?
For him, it's going to be footwork. You know, there were a lot of times throughout the course of the season it was false pressure. Not necessarily the blitz, but sliding to the right when he didn't have to. He could have slid up into the pocket, taking some of that pressure on the offensive line, and that allows you maybe to not escape outside and deliver the football down the field. Those are things that he's going to view when he watches the film in the offseason and say, maybe I could have stayed in the pocket a little longer. Maybe I could have anticipated this. And that just comes with experience. There are a lot of things that he hasn't seen in the National Football League. And number one, he has to prove that he can beat the blitz. When once he does that, then yes, he'll have he'll have a little bit more experience as the year goes on, at least for his career. But it's one of those things, we don't know what's going to happen again.
Right.
If Ben comes back, we won't see Duck. But either way, it creates a lot of competition for Duck and Mason in the offseason. I think it just allows those two to grow and get better, and it's ultimately up to them to prove that they can go ahead and do the little things to get them ready and get these coaches excited for the 2020 season.
All right, I want you to get out your crystal ball. I know it is only January, but with the three guys we already talked about, also Paxton Lynch is still in the roster, JT Barrett, somebody the Steelers picked up towards the end of the season. What is this quarterback room going to look like? Maybe we'll go as far as training camp in July.
Well, I think I expect right now that these guys will be on the roster. I thought Paxton Lynch did a really good job of showing that he's capable of throwing the football down the field. I wasn't in the meeting room, don't know the knowledge of how he's able to now pick up that playbook. But for him, you love his size, former first-round pick, for him to go out there and actually perform. So are the coaches excited about that? That will play itself out. But I think when you look at somebody like JT Barrett, he was on the roster a couple weeks. He showed some flashes, but he showed enough that said, you want to know what? We're going to sign you here to bring you back in the offseason. So obviously this organization is excited about what JT Barrett brings to the table. But either way, there's going to be a lot more there's a lot more competition in the quarterback room, and that's something that you have to have, because when you see that competition, you see every quarterback making throws, you're saying to yourself, I need to put on my best performance. And ultimately, it helps in that room, but for the bigger picture and the scheme of things, it helps with the team.
All right, and don't forget, Coach Tomlin did tell us in that season-ending press conference as well, the beginning of February is when we should expect maybe a big update on Ben Roethlisberger. So we will stay tuned and, of course, keep you covered if we get any of that information.
Sounds good.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. We're going to take a break. We will return here on Steelers Live in just a bit. All right, welcome back, everyone. It is never too early to talk about free agency, right, guys? March 18th is the big day. The unrestricted free agents get a lot of the pub, but restricted free agents is a list that the Steelers have this year, and we'll kind of take you through the names and Labs. Maybe you can help us understand the process, because it is a puzzle. As Kevin Colbert always says, here you see the list of restricted free agents for the Steelers: Zach Banner, Cam Canada, Jordan Dangerfield, Matt Filer, and Mike Hilton. So, Labs, what do we need to know before we even think about the unrestricted guys?
Well, you know, as you mentioned, it is a puzzle, and it all has to fit together, that puzzle being the salary cap. And you look at this list of restricted free agents, Matt Filer is a starter, Cam Canada is the long snapper, therefore a starter as well. Mike Hilton is the starting slot cornerback, and Zach Banner is an integral part of both the offensive line and as the extra tight end, extra blocker, part of the run game. So these are significant pieces to the puzzle. And the Steelers, one of the first things they have to do is extend them qualifying offers. And the qualifying offer is tied to what the compensation would be in return to the Steelers if those restricted free agents would leave. And a lot of those guys that we saw on that original list came to the team as free agents. And so if you have to put the tender high enough to get more back than just the right to match the offer. And so, you know, those numbers, as soon as you make those tender offers, they count on the cap. And so all of this stuff has to, as you said, fit in together. And the Steelers have some decisions to make with those guys in terms of the amount of tender they want to apply to the ones they really want to keep.
And Wolf, I'm glad that's not our job to figure it all out, right?
Remember, I flunked math twice.
Okay, now for the Steelers, 8 unrestricted free agents. So we are going to play a little game called Stay or Go. You guys are going to play general manager. These are your opinions of what you would do with the Steelers' 8 unrestricted guys. So Wolf, you're going to set us up here. So first we have Artie Burns. Stay or go?
He's going to go.
All right. Sean Davis.
I think he's going to go as well.
All righty.
Bud Dupree, I hope he stays, baby.
So put him in the
yes,
same.
oh,
All right.
definitely stay.
I'm glad you put him over there.
Yeah.
BJ
Finney, that's a stay as well.
Okay.
Javon Hargrave, I think he's going to go.
Okay.
Tyler Matakevich, I think he's going to stay.
Okay.
With a caveat we'll talk about later.
All right.
Nick Van Nett, I hope that's a stay as well.
Got it. Okay, one more.
LT Walton, probably going to go.
All right. Labs, this is what Wolf would do and what he thinks is going to happen. Give us your opinion. Who are we moving around or changing here?
I would move Tyler Matakevich to go because he will get an opportunity to play defense. If
like an LJ Fort?
Yes.
Okay.
If he goes to another team.
Got it.
I don't see him having a role on the Steelers' defense at inside linebacker, what with Devin Bush, Mark Barron, and Vince Williams kind of ahead of him on the depth chart. I think Tyler is good enough to play defense in the NFL if he finds the right situation for himself. And I think that there is going to be a team that is going to give him the kind of offer befitting a starter, and the Steelers will not be able to match that.
Okay.
The same with Javon Hargrave. Nick Van Nett, I think he stays. Bud Dupree, that's a no-brainer. He will be, I believe, either in a Steelers uniform next year or sitting at home, not doing anything.
Don't even say that option.
Okay.
We don't want to go there, Labs.
But I'm just,
You're just saying.
Yes,
okay.
I'm just saying. BJ Finney, I really would like to see him stay as well. I don't know, though, that his situation won't be similar to Tyler Matakevich's in terms of
he could start.
Yeah, can BJ, would the Steelers be willing to start their backup center at a different position?
That's a big question.
That's a big question. If they are not, he would be a go. I'm going to leave him, though, at stay.
You're going to leave him here?
A little
Okay.
wishful
So do we
thinking.
agree?
Yeah, leave those three.
Okay. Not too bad. Wolf, do you agree? Bud Dupree, the big one?
No question about it. Bud has blossomed this year like any other year. This is what we looked for. You talk about the second-year jump and then maybe the third-year jump. Well, this was a fifth-year jump, but boy, what a jump it was. Between you got T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree. Those two are the two guys you want on a high-velocity, high-intensity, pin-your-ears-back defense coming after the quarterback. Bud Dupree's a lock. And I do no-brainers really well.
The Artie Burns, Sean Davis, I think both of those guys will be looking to go somewhere where they can start. Neither one of them, I don't see a spot for them in the Steelers starting lineup at cornerback for Artie Burns, safety for Sean Davis. Javon Hargrave, I think he's just going to get paid enough to leave. And I also believe that Tyson Alualu could play in the center of the three-man line well enough to eat up the snaps that the Steelers are in actually a three-man defensive line, which isn't that often.
Right. I would also say that the caveat that I talked about, Tyler Matakevich, you're right on. If he can find a right opportunity to start, it could be a good move, but he understands one thing. He understands that he's well appreciated here.
Oh, I know.
He's loved. He's respected. That might not be any upgrade to play, to be able to move up with the inside linebackers that we got. But he is a core four guy. He is one of those guys that heightens all the special teams with his great play. I wouldn't be surprised, besides I just saw him on the way in, he trimmed up his beard, looks very good. The fact that Tyler could stay given the right amount.
Yeah, but I think that's going to be his decision to
Right,
leave.
absolutely.
All right. Well, we still have a lot of time before free agency kicks in to debate that, but this is our first initial take at it. And as always, we'll see what happens with other teams, other players, the restricted guys, as you said, Lab. So a lot to talk about as we move forward. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Our thanks to Charlie as well. Thanks for joining us this week on Steelers Live. We'll see you next time.